We understand our pets' love. It becomes apparent each time they look at us with their large, expressive eyes. Their affection is as unmistakable as if they could articulate their feelings. This tale revolves around a dog's boundless devotion to its owner and the fresh hope that blossomed from it. Once, there was an old man named Martin who lived in a small farming village. He had been a farmer his whole life, but as he got older, he couldn't work in the fields anymore. His son had moved to the city and had a job there. Martin was proud of his son and loved him very much, but it was a bit sad when he had to sell his farm and move to the village. Martin's son wanted him to come live with his family in the city, but even though Martin couldn't work on the farm anymore, the village was like his home, and he didn't want to leave. He still enjoyed taking long walks in the fields, and he helped young farmers by teaching them how to grow better crops. Many of these young farmers came to him with questions, and Martin really enjoyed helping them. Martin's son Arthur found comfort in knowing that his father had brought his old sheepdog to the village with him. They had been together for a very long time and couldn't bear to be separated, but as time passed, the old dog became sick and lost his sight, and Martin had to say a sad farewell to his dear friend. It was a very heart-wrenching experience. Arthur, who visited often, asked his dad to get a new dog to help mend his broken heart, but Martin thought he was too old for that. However, he felt a deep sense of loneliness without his old companion. It left a big gap in his heart that couldn't be filled. Everyone knew how much he loved animals, yet now he had none to care for. Nevertheless, even though he had grown old and tired, Martin continued to wake up early each day to take his usual morning walk. After more than 70 years of this routine, he couldn't bring himself to change it. One chilly morning during his walk, a young farmer called out to Martin. The young man rushed over with something in his hands. Before Martin could react, the young man placed a little puppy in his arms. The sweet puppy yawned and playfully licked Martin's fingers. Martin's heart melted, but he firmly told the young man that he didn't want a new dog. The young man explained that this puppy was the smallest of the litter, with one leg slightly shorter than the others. He wouldn't make a good working dog. If Martin didn't take him, he would have no home as they couldn't keep him on the farm. What would happen to him without anyone to look after him? Martin looked down and right into dark brown eyes staring back at him. A little button nose was sniffing in the air. He couldn't say no. He knew that the young man was likely only trying to repay his kindness, but the thought that this puppy wouldn't have anyone to love him was just too much to bear. Martin put the puppy inside his jacket, and the young man smiled. He promised he would bring some food to Martin's house later that day, so the old man wouldn't have to carry it on his own from the village shop. Martin knew that he had no more choice. His heart would not allow him to let the dog go to another home. He looked down at the now sleeping puppy, and his heart filled with love. That's why he called the pup Abby. Abby was a very clever dog. He quickly learned to take long walks with Martin and to take care of him. He even brought the old man his walking stick before they went out. The entire village knew Abby, and they loved him for the joy that he brought back into Martin's life. Arthur was overjoyed the next time he came to visit with his wife and saw that his father had a new friend. But the good news didn't stop there. Arthur had come to bring his father fantastic news. Martin's first grandchild was on his way. Arthur was going to have his own son. It was wonderful news indeed. Abby did a happy dance and barked along with the family, although he had no idea what they were celebrating. His family's joy was his own. Abby grew up and learned not to chase every rabbit and squirrel they met on their walks. He learned to love the quiet times sitting in front of the fire with Martin. Wherever they went, they were always together. They even went on a massive adventure to the city one day. The city wasn't that far from the village, and there was a train you could take to get there. One morning, Martin and Abby took a train ride instead of their usual walk. The city had so many exciting scents for a dog to explore. They got off the train, walked a few blocks, and found a pretty house with delightful smelling flowers. Martin knocked on the door, and Arthur welcomed them in. Inside, they discovered a small crib where Abby saw the new baby for the first time. The baby smelled nice and was very tiny, making Abby feel like he needed protection. So Abby lay down next to the crib, and they had a wonderful visit. After a day or two, though, Martin began to miss the open spaces of the village, and it was time to return home. They visited a few more times, and each time the baby, little Joel, grew a bit bigger. Eventually, Joel could even play fetch and run around with Abby. However, as Joel grew, Martin continued to age. The family begged him to live with them, but he wouldn't. He always joked that Abby looked after him well enough. He wanted to be home in the village until one morning. Abby woke up for their early walk, but Martin didn't. Abby laid his head on the quiet chest and gave out little whimpers. The people of the village were quick to notice that Martin didn't take his morning walk, and they went to check on him. There they found the old man and his best friend beside him. They called Arthur, and a funeral was arranged in town. Everyone felt that it was only fair to allow Abby to be there. He was there for every other step. Abby quietly rested beside the casket until it was carried to the cemetery and buried. After that, Arthur and his family made several attempts to convince Abby to come home with them, but he refused. They even tried to put a leash on him, but Abby just ran away. He wouldn't respond to Joel's calls either. Eventually, they had no choice but to return home and request help from some villagers to watch over Abby while they were away. The dog, who had loved his owner deeply, now grieved with the same level of devotion. He would spend the entire day near his owner's grave in the cemetery. At night, he would return home and sleep in their bed. The village and Arthur had left a place open for him to stay. Everyone tried to feed Abby, but he only ate the bare minimum. It seemed like his heart was too heavy for food. Whenever Arthur tried to bring him back home, Abby would hide in the woods where they used to take walks. He just wasn't ready to leave yet. Then, one day, Arthur sat down next to Abby in the cemetery. He talked to Abby and said that his father, Martin, loved Abby very much, and they all missed Martin. But he explained that Martin wouldn't want Abby to live all alone in sadness. They all loved Abby, and even Joel loved him. They really wanted Abby to come live with them, but they couldn't make him if he didn't want to. Arthur spoke to Abby as if he were a person and hoped that Abby understood some of the words. But when Abby didn't show any sign of getting up, Arthur sighed and left. He decided to try again another day. The sad dog, Abby, missed his owner a lot, but slowly he started to act more like a dog again. He began eating a little more, and one day, he even chased after a rabbit. But what happened next is a touching part of the story. One early morning, Abby went to the cemetery, just like he always did. But this time, he didn't stay for long at Martin's grave. It seemed as if he was saying goodbye. Then, Abby ran and jumped onto a train. The train took him all the way to the city. Abby knew where to get off and followed familiar scents to a house with many flowers. There he barked until Arthur and his family came outside. They couldn't believe their eyes. Abby had made up his mind to be with them. He would always miss his master, but this was still his family, and they would find happiness together once more.